And we're live. It's 7 p.m. in state-controlled Britain, where we're under the iron fist of Keir Starmer. And this morning, a petition was online, by the way, to have another election. It's already had 600,000 signatures. But anyway, you might see that we're sharing the screen with someone called Dr. Eric Westman. And if he was here, he would say that he likes Richard Smith because he's really good with all the mechanistic stuff and he gives basic biochemistry lessons. So that's a recommendation to say hello to Richard Smith, the UK's top nutritionist. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Stephen. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And I am very proud to share the screen with you every single time we do this.
Likewise.
So I just want you to say thank you. And I think it was nice that you got that from Dr. Eric Westman. And of course, let's shout out Lou Copus, the Kent Carnivore, who was the interviewer who put that up. And I think, when you're getting the attention of much bigger influencers, that's a really good sign that your information is spot on. Dr. Eric Westman is, got a huge following, 250,000, something like that. Been around a long time. Does his own research papers. So, it's a good recommendation to have. So there you go. All right. Should we go straight into the questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, I haven't done the housekeeping. Do put a QQQ in front of the questions so they stand out exactly like Paul has done here, although he's put a question mark upside down and the right way around as well, which is another way of showing it. The best way to get attention is a super chat, which helps both our channels. So if you can offer a super chat, it keeps us giving our information out for free. So Paul is asking, do you think if one is eating 0 carbs, then there is no damage occurring from type 2 diabetes? I've reduced my daily blood glucose level from 345 milligrams per deciliter to 280 in the last 90 days. Do you want to go first, Rich?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question. So if someone is low carb, is there no damage occurring from type 2 diabetes, or does he mean potentially towards type 2? Anyway, let's cut to the chase in regards to 0 carb. If you're not consuming carbohydrate in any form, you're going to be consuming far less glucose because all carbs break down into sugar. Sugar or glucose glycates cells and cause oxidative damage. So if you're on 0 carb, then I believe that you are going to be considerably healthier than if you were living a lifestyle that consumed high carbohydrate, for example. But carb is not the only contributor to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. By percentage, seed oils, in my opinion, contribute more. And purely because if we look at the population calorie consumption, we consume far more from seed oils than we do from anything else in regards to its effect on insulin resistance. So we don't just want to be avoiding the carb. We need to keep an eye on those vegetable oils that are high in that toxic omega-6 called linoleic acid.
Brilliant. Yes. I mean, I think with the question there, they're just firstly proving their own premise. Because their blood glucose level is still high, 280 is still high, but after 90 days, getting it down from 345 down to 280 is really good. And I think Rich is pointing out it's not just carbs that cause damage. It is things like seed oils, lectins, if you're not completely off of other foods, because lectins have a huge impact on insulin levels. So you've got to look at the whole package. Yeah, blood glucose is coming down at the moment. Could we measure your insulin, see that you're producing less insulin to get that result? Or are you suddenly pumping out more insulin? You're not, Paul, but I'm just saying they're the sort of questions that you need to think about when you're looking at your blood glucose level. And it's normal, for instance, is in the background, the insulin level double than what it should be. So this is why when I'm talking about blood tests, it's always good to get a fasted insulin, C-peptide, which is a proxy marker for production of insulin, because you could be thinking you're hunky-dory and everything's great. You could be sort of 100 milligrams per deciliter or less and thinking everything's good, but in the background there's a lot of insulin needed, and that's how you'd be able to diagnose diabetes before it actually happened, because you could see the insulin trending up. So anyone that's looking for bloods, that's what I would recommend. You don't just get the blood glucose, you get fasted insulin and C-peptide, and you can see what's actually going on there as well, your insulin production. So a few people saying that they found you because of Dr. Westman, which is really great. Thank you for coming on. I would imagine they've gone to your channel, Richard.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very much cool. Appreciate it. Yeah, I need all the help I can get.
Well, like I say, that's a top man that has recommended you, so that's really good. Now, this is a nice, interesting question. Vin Man, lost 25 pounds on Carnivore, and I'm eating less than 20 grams of carbs a day. Take electrolytes, but I still get calf and hamstring cramps.
Yeah, it's quite common. Vin, it would be handy to know which brand of electrolyte you're consuming and what the ratios are. Many electrolytes on the market do not have the correct ratio. In my opinion, we want to be avoiding excessive amounts of calcium. So if you are consuming things like A2 dairy, cheese, eggs, for example, and not consuming adequate amounts of magnesium to offset this, then this can cause cramping, especially in the calves. Calcium is excitatory to the muscle. So calcium excites the muscle and magnesium comes in and calms it down. In fact, I would not be able to do this with my arm if it wasn't for both calcium and magnesium. The issue that we find with excessive amounts of calcium is calcium will deplete magnesium. Low levels of magnesium affect the reabsorption of potassium. So now the whole ratio of sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium are out of whack just because we've overconsumed one mineral. I'm not saying that that is the case, but in most people, it's either a case of excessive amounts or too much calcium consumption versus the consumption of magnesium. There are other contributing factors also. You could be consuming too much electrolytes. You could be consuming not enough, or you could be consuming too much water. So you can consume too much electrolytes and become dehydrated if the water consumption combined with those electrolytes is not adequate. And also the opposite is true. If you consume too much liquid, then you'd be doing nothing but flushing out the electrolytes that you are putting in. So it can be quite complicated. Cramping can also be caused by oxalate detox. So this is another side effect that people don't talk about. So if your cramps seem to be cyclical, if they come and go, and some days they seem perfectly fine, and then it comes back with a vengeance for a few days, maybe a week later, that could be oxalate detox. If that's the case, then potassium citrate is the electrolyte that we want to increase there. Potassium citrate has a high affinity to oxalate. And a side effect of oxalate detox is a condition called hypokalemia, which is low potassium, because these oxalate that you could be detoxing may be binding. Many other things going on in there, but without lots of information to go on, that's just a quick stab in the dark. But Vin, come back and let us know which electrolytes you're taking and whether you are consuming lots of eggs and cheese and A2 dairy, for example, because that may just be the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say to people, if you're putting any questions up, just be patient. We always try to give proper, full answers. One of us will answer. But if puts a name in the question, we tend to get that person to answer. So Meat-tastic is saying, I heard Rich say the other day he doesn't often wash his hands because the bacteria is good. What's the general consensus? Re-chopping boards. We have a wooden one.
Perfect. Fantastic. Yeah. Mine too is wooden. Not that it gets much use these days, because I tend not to be chopping an awful lot of things up anymore. I used to love cooking, believe it or not. I used to cook, and I don't know if I've told you this, Steve. I used to grow veg in a greenhouse in my garden, and my garden, I used to grow all sorts of vegetables. I was big into my veg, and this is what people don't understand. I've come from a position in which when I gravitated into being ketogenic, I predominated plant compounds because I believed that they were highly beneficial to me. So this isn't the case that I've just become carnivore and flicked the switch against all veg. I have been there. You know, I used to love consuming vegetables, and I would use my chopping board for that purpose. Wood is fantastic. And yes, you're right. I probably wash my hands maybe once a day. Sounds disgusting, but bacteria is incredibly beneficial. We certainly don't want to be putting on toxins on our skin, anti-bac and so on and so forth. I've in fact told my little girl on the way into school, you know, when they tried to give her any anti-bac, not to put it on there. You know, we're designed to be exposed to these bacteria on a daily basis. This was a question I put to Sarah Pugh when she was on my podcast recently, and she said, "Do you want me to answer that truthfully, you know, or words to that effect?" And I asked her that for a reason, because I knew what was coming, and she said exactly the same. So if you don't take it from me, then take it from Sarah Pugh. But wash your chopping boards with hot water. You know, you don't need to add toxic chemicals. That's all I wash everything with is hot water. And, you know, to be honest, I don't use soap. I don't use aftershave any longer, at least very often. If I'm going somewhere where, you know, I'm presenting, potentially I may spray something on my clothes, but I'm even against the over consumption or over usage of cologne and aftershave on clothes as well, because anything that touches the skin is absorbed to a degree. And personally, I don't put anything on my skin that I wouldn't eat. So that includes, and I used to be a huge advocate of certain hand creams, because I've always suffered with dry skin. If I want to use anything now, then I'll use tallow cream. There's a brand that I use. My goodness, what's the brand called? I stock them, and I can't remember what they're called. I will find out, because they're a fantastic brand. This is the only thing that I use. I put it on my lips also, on the skin. It's there somewhere. You crack on, Steve, while I look for this. Only because it's live. Tallow Glow, of course it is. Tallow Glow is the brand that I use. So check them out. Fantastic range of tallow products. I know you use a different brand also, Steve, but tallow is fantastic for the skin. I use it on my lips. I use it on my hands if and when I need it. Sometimes I put it onto my face. But bar that, you know, nothing else as far as toxins go in regards to creams and cosmetics go anywhere near my skin any longer.
Excellent. Matthew, I don't know if it's our Matthew, but I don't think it is. Does white rice help with keeping the gut in an anaerobic environment, or do you think meat is better?
I think meat, for me, is always going to be preferenced. You know, we quite often hear the excuse from people that, you know, we're all different, but we're not really. Biologically, we're all the same. We're designed to thrive on animal proteins and natural fats. Rice is the better of the carb to take, in my opinion, than many. And the reason for this, that white rice is lectin-free. So it's going to cause far less damage to the body than brown rice, for example, or carb from another form. So white rice would be preference for me, but it is very high in carbohydrate. 70 to 80%, I think, of the weight of that is going to be carb. And remember, you know, we divide that number again by 20, I think, Stephen, isn't it, to give us the total weight of glucose. Is that right? But it's, look, in regards to what rice in particular, white is going to be preference, but meat, for me, it's always going to be animal proteins. If we look at every cell in the body by weight, it's 70% water. If we remove the water, we're left with 18%. So 18% being protein, 30% of the remainder. So the predominant of there is animal proteins. Then it drops right down to 5%, which is lipid, and 2%, which is polysaccharide. So for me, in regards to any benefit in regards to health, animal proteins and natural fats are always going to be preference.
I mean, I think one of the things I would like to ask the questioner is why are they interested in keeping the gut in an anaerobic environment? Because I know we're talking about fermentation here when you've got white rice, which will deplete oxygen in that environment. But I don't really see the benefit of that, really. because what are you doing? Because you've got white rice, which has the lowest, if you're looking at that as a low level of fiber, not compared to meat, by the way, I'm just saying, if you look at that in isolation, you're going to get faster digestion, and there's going to be less substrate for the aerobic bacteria. So yeah, that's where this is possibly coming from. But what is beneficial about that? I mean, I feel that I struggle to see the benefit of that, to be honest. Why would you do that? Have you got any take on that, Richard? Have you heard that before?
I don't. It'd be nice for Matthew to bounce a question back in there, and just fill that out. So
Which is not saying, it's not saying it's a stupid question, by the way. I always like to know why people ask a question, because if they've heard something, I mean, one of the things in the title, by the way, was for tonight was about N=1. If you've heard something, we want to know what you've heard so we can discuss it. It's not an echo chamber here. So it's not like, being blocked by Lane Norton or something because you want to have a decent conversation. If you want to have a decent conversation and you're interested in non-carnivore foods or even non-keto foods, then we'll talk about it, because that's the only way we all learn, really. Anyway, let's move on. So Carol is saying, Stephen, so I guess my time is up. I can't sit in the background now. I have to answer a question. Stephen, when measuring triglycerides in bloods, is the existing glycerol from vaping, say, deducted from the triglycerides? No, actually, basically, when you do the bloods, it's an enzymatic assay, which is a posh way of saying, how do they measure it? Well, they use enzymes that have an affinity with that substance, and they can measure triglycerides. So you wouldn't be worried about other things like that have glycerol that aren't triglycerides, because the enzymes won't act on those things. So we are actually dealing in bloods in that way. So you get a reasonably good level. In fact, this is one of the things that we could talk about, because LDL was the other thing, and it always comes up. Low density lipoproteins is a calculated measurement in most cases. There was a big debate between Bart Kay and Vegan Gains, where Vegan Gains said, no, it's definitely measured. Well, I can tell you from a decade of doing private blood tests and being a phlebotomist myself and actually taking bloods for a bit, because I always like to know how everything works. LDL is calculated in most cases. It's not a direct measurement. I know when we start talking about fractions, there's a little bit more measurement involved, but triglycerides are measured, and that's how I know the answer to that question, because triglycerides and HDL are easier to measure because of the enzymatic assays. So hopefully that's all right. Reading between the lines, Carol, I'm assuming that you've had some triglyceride measurements and you vape, and you want to know about the numbers. You can always email me, join the school community tomorrow, email me the bloods and we'll have a look at them. So that's that. Did you want to add anything to that, Richard?
Perfect. Spot on.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Jenny is saying, doctor gave me 1,000 IUs of D3. Oh, one of my pet hates coming up. 1,000 milligrams of calcium carbonate because I'm on aromatase inhibitors because of estrogen positive breast cancer. I'm carnivore 3 weeks. Is the calcium safe? Seems a lot per day. And also, Richard, I'm going to pass it over to you because you like talking about the electrolytes. If we're going to talk about calcium, what about calcium carbonate as possibly one of the worst ones to have?
It's look, what we can't give, Steve, is medical advice. So always bear in mind that the advice we give is purely from our perspective and our expertise within working within this space and our opinion. So we could never go against what a doctor tells you per se. But what I can say is that there's 3 papers in particular that I've studied in regards to calcium consumption, over 700 milligrams, and it shows an increased risk of cardiovascular disease by as much as 15%. Now, there are lots of confounding factors with this. There's confounding factors with every research paper that we look at. And by that, what I mean is most research papers are done on groups of sick people. So, when we make a change, we usually see a change in the output. Very little papers are done on carnivores or low-carb people or ketogenic, for example. So excessive amounts of calcium within these groups of people may yield a completely different result. And I'll give you an example. When we've looked at honey in testing for type 2 diabetes and blood glucose and insulin, honey is deemed to be a safe option for a type 2 diabetic because it doesn't elicit as much of a glycemic response. Yet, this is done on testing where they've compared honey to sugar. But when you compare honey to no honey, then it's incredibly high on the glycemic index. So this is an example of how different papers will test against different groups of people. And Steve, you mentioned, I think, was it last week, in certain study groups, that you can whittle out certain groups of people within your trial to make your figures look better in regards to what you wanted to show. So, I mean, we really need to take these studies with a pinch of salt. But yeah, look, I'm not a big fan of calcium in particular, but you are consuming the D3. Look, I personally try to consume less calcium from the diet. We get plenty of calcium in beef. Eggs are incredibly high, contain around 24, 25 milligrams per egg, depending on the size, obviously. Cheese is going to be incredibly high. A2 dairy, again, going to be incredibly high. But we do want this ratio, of calcium to magnesium for muscle function issue at a cellular level, at least. But yeah, what would you add, Steve?
Pretty much nothing else. I think that's a really good answer. I think I would probably have a higher level of D3, and I would also consider magnesium because the vitamin D receptor burns up a lot of magnesium. And I would also look at K2 because I think when you start consuming D3, it's good to have K2 to make sure that the calcium that you want in the bone and not in the soft tissue is escorted out, because that's exactly what the K2 does. Well, it doesn't do it independently. It activates the matrix protein, and it also attaches to osteocalcin. So when that calcium goes in, the matrix protein is activated by K2. So that becomes like the bodyguard of the soft tissue. And then the osteocalcin is hooked up by the K2, and it takes the calcium direct to the bone. I mean, that's the latest theories of the mechanism. So I think that's what I would do. I'd make sure that calcium isn't getting into the soft tissues, getting into the bone, and I would probably look at a bigger dose of D3. Now, I know that your belief about D3 is that it is an acute phase reaction, or it basically lowers when people get sick, not the other way around. So I think it's possibly something we should do as a podcast, just about an hour of just talk about D3, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to go into in regards to D3. I'm not against D3, but again, as you say, I think it's a marker of metabolic health and not the other way around. That said, it is essential, for all of the reasons that you've just mentioned. But I mean, reading into there now in regards to estrogen, we want to be avoiding foods that cause problems with the endocrine system, and they're primarily plant-based. Lots of the plant compounds we consume are endocrine disruptors. They have many issues with estrogen. They'll activate the 17B estradiol receptor, causing an increase in estrogen and so on and so forth. So it's things like genistein in onions and anthocyanin in berries, and it's found in most plants. Lots of phytoestrogens, flavonoids, nerinogen, another one. They're found in abundance in vegetables. So if you're consuming or living a ketogenic-based lifestyle, then I gravitate more towards a meat-based lifestyle. Living this way just seems to heal and repair so many things within the body. I don't know if I've mentioned this previously, Steve, actually, but I was once told that I was unable to have children. Have we gone into this before?
No, never.
No, it's so yeah, I was tested and I was told that I'd never have kids because the motility and the quantity of my sperm was inadequate. After living a ketogenic lifestyle, so I was ketogenic at that time, basically began consuming more animal proteins and natural fats, but I was still plant heavy at the time, but I was ketogenic. Yeah, several months later, you know, my little girl was in the oven, shall we say. So it's incredible. And we see this across the board, don't we, with people that we work with in regards to the way that the body works and hormone production. Just eat meat, natural fats, and animal proteins, I think, is the way forward. So if you are consuming, especially from cruciferous vegetables, cruciferous veg, incredibly high in isothiocyanates, which can be detrimental to the endocrine system. So try to avoid them and consume more natural fats and animal proteins.
Yeah, I think that's very kind of you to share that, actually.
Talk for another day.
Yeah, talk for another day. When people are saying how much vitamin D3 and how much K2 and how much magnesium, well, normally what would happen is if you get D3, you tend to get it with K2 and magnesium. You can get it where it's already formulated. So, and going back onto Matthew's question originally about the anaerobic environment for the gut, I mean, I am aware that, you know, most gut bacteria, you know, allegedly are anaerobic, but you need oxygen for absolutely everything. And I don't really buy into the fact that you need to biohack the environment so much, because the healthy gut bacteria or the alpha diversity, when I send off, or, you know, clients send off for their gut microbiome composition, it always comes back as ideal, and they're all carnivores, and they're not doing anything other than eating this way. So mine's ideal. I've been carnivore 6 years. So I think that's I wasn't saying it's a silly question. I was just trying to dive into where this is coming from, because most carnivores, when they do get the alpha diversity test or the gut microbiome, however you want to word it, it comes back ideal. Yeah. So no biohacking. So let's do the next thing. Sorry, I was just messaging someone there. I think it's Caroline there. Caroline has had a recurrence of psoriasis accompanied by extreme tingling in my fingers. I haven't deviated from carnivore, so am at a loss as to why. I suppose the obvious first port of call is to ask the obvious questions. Have you been under stress, which is, you know, a very well-known trigger? The tingling in the fingers, is that something that you normally have when you have a flare-up, or is that a new thing? Because anything that's new is always worth talking about as an investigation. Small injuries to the skin can obviously cause that. So that's something to consider. If you've had an infection recently, some people don't even know they've had an infection. And again, this comes from bloods, because you know, when you see thousands and thousands of data points, and you occasionally have to say to someone, this indicates you've had an infection. Have you had an infection? They often say no. Should I be worried? And I'm like, no, I think what we're reading is your body doing what it should do. The immune system is working. So you might have had an infection. Cold weather, if you're in the UK or anywhere where it's suddenly got cold, that can trigger it as well. And that might even actually be a little bit why you know, your fingers are tingling. The fingers tingling, the reason I'm going back to that is, you know, there might be two things that are happening. You might have an impingement of a nerve or something. Are you taking non-steroid or anti-inflammatory drugs for an injury? Because they can bring on psoriasis. I mean, there's just hundreds of things, hormonal changes. So it might not be diet. I think that you probably noticed that list wasn't about what you're eating. You know, psoriasis, yes, diet can make a huge difference and reduce it, but flare-ups tend to be some other factor. That's what I would say. Richard?
Yeah, fantastic. And I completely agree. I think, you know, when we gravitate into this way of living, we see so many positives come from changing what we put into our mouth. And rightly so, because what we put in is what we get out. But sometimes I think, you know, we get to the end of the line and the diet hasn't done something. So we need to look at other factors also. So, and I think you've mentioned those there. You know, we become these biohackers, essentially, don't we? You know, what began as just changing from the food that we consumed, now we are looking at getting the best quality light and, wearing blue blockers and grounding and so on and so forth. And I think, all of these things are incredibly important. But from a dietary perspective, psoriasis can be caused from intestinal permeability. If you are carnivore, then generally this does tend to repair and reverse most forms of intestinal permeability, unless you're still consuming milk. Casein in milk can still cause intestinal permeability. Beyond that, it'd be interesting to find out what your diet is, Caroline, in regards to being carnivore. Eggs can be problematic, pork can be problematic, chicken can be problematic, fish can be problematic, caffeine or coffee at least can be problematic. So even though we're living a carnivore lifestyle, if we are still consuming any of these, each and every one of these, and in most cases, quite often, in most cases, more than one of these is a contributing factor. So just removing one isn't going to be enough. The best protocol, if you are looking to do an elimination protocol, is remove everything. Just consume beef and lamb, grass-fed beef and lamb. I would even say probably preference lamb over the beef, personally. But there's nothing wrong with beef. I just believe, Stephen and I believe both have the same line of thinking in regards to this, that lamb is quite possibly more beneficial because it contains way more omega-3s. The fat in lamb contains 10 times the omega-3s than that from beef. The amino profile, vitamin and mineral profile, I also believe to be at least equal to, if not superior. But that would be, my addition to what you've just said there, Steve, from a dietary perspective. Maybe go purely lamb and beef for a number of weeks and see. Also, it could be a case that you might be detoxing oxalates. So if the psoriasis coming back is cyclical, if the tingling is cyclical, i.e. if you're fine for a week or two and then it comes back for a few days, or a certain period of time and then it disappears again, this can be a sign of detoxing oxalate. And again, just to reiterate something we mentioned earlier, potassium citrate has a high affinity to oxalate, so you could look at supplementing with that to help negate. But apologies, Karen, without more information, I think it's difficult to guide any further there, isn't it, Steve? But we've thrown some suggestions there to take a look at.
Yeah, I think that's a very full and frank answer. MJ has given us a £3.99 super sticker, so that's very kind of you, MJ. Much appreciated. And just going back to supplementation, I mean, you know ever such a lot about this. When we talk about magnesium, I mean, I'm a great believer in timing is also of the essence, and also the type of magnesium. So would you split like magnesium malate, like 200 grams in the morning, and then maybe glycinate in the evening because of the effect on relaxation? 200 milligrams.
If you have the two types, then do this. Citrate is also very bioavailable. Magnesium oxide is a form that we want to avoid. And again, as you say, as and when you take it has a big impact on how it's absorbed in the body. I tend to take mine, just to show you guys there, that's mine there. I tend to drink a little bit throughout the day, low levels more frequently. I tend not to drink so much around meal times, but if I'm out, then I will. But glycinate for certain, later in the night. If you're struggling to consume it, i.e. you don't want to drink too much, then you can look at capsules or tablets, or you can get sprays. I know the Real Food Company do a few different types of magnesium, which are topical, so you can put those on the bottom of your feet also. So other alternatives there, but lots of alternatives. Timing is really important, and the type. Just avoid the type that has the lowest bioavailability, which is magnesium oxide.
Yes, and I think somebody was saying about the tingling in your fingers. You could look at thiamine, vitamin B1, which is one of the things that can stop the tingling. But normally there is B1 in fish, meat, and eggs and dairy products. So I wouldn't imagine it's a shortage of that personally, or a deficiency, I should say. Let's go to the next question. Thank you all for the questions. Don't forget the super chat helps to support the channel and also gets your question bumped up, because we probably won't get through absolutely everyone, because as you can see, we do actually try to answer every question fully and even follow up. So United Carnivore is saying, what would be the optimal Thanksgiving meal for both of you? Well, firstly, as we're both in the UK, we don't really do Thanksgiving, but I'll take the question in the spirit it's meant. If I was having a Thanksgiving meal, firstly, I would be exercising vitamin G, which is gratitude. But at the moment, lamb is hitting the spot for me. Our good friend Dr. Abs, who's currently doing a live right now in a giveaway. If you're interested in cosmetics and longevity and find us not hitting the button for you, he's currently doing it. He took me to a sort of Brazilian restaurant the other day, and we had a nice chat there. And the lamb was just absolutely stunning. And we've had a leg of lamb. The top of the leg of lamb is particularly nice. We had a roast the other day, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. In the UK, we have what's called a Barnsley chop, which is a wonderful way of having the lamb, and it is just so succulent. Now, you're saying a Thanksgiving meal. That would be my meal. Just lamb. Wow. That would, oh, man, that's it. So that would be mine. Sorry if boring, but that's it. That's what I would have.
Super simple.
Richard?
Yeah, look, I tend to eat the same thing pretty much every day, or the same foods. It's either beef or lamb for me. I'm not against. I do eat chicken occasionally. Turkey. Would I eat turkey? Yeah, I mean, I used to eat lots of turkey. I cook the best turkey, as it happens. I just haven't cooked it for a number of years because I'm so deep into enjoying my beef steak, my chuck steak, and my lamb. But snap, I was out today. My little girl competed in a trampoline competition, so I took her for food after. Caused havoc in the restaurant because I always do, making sure that they don't cook in the seed oils. So I had, what did I have? It was a sirloin with 4 poached eggs, and that was it. So it's super simple, but that's what I tend to eat on most days. I may venture towards a turkey, but it needs to be nice and moist. Difficult to do that with a turkey, but there is a knack to it, and I will let you guys in on my secret at a later date.
Right, next question. Fascinating one. Arachidonic acid, or AA as most people now call it, linked to prostate growth. What is your opinion? Go on, Rich, sorry.
Yeah, look, unsure in regards to prostate growth, but arachidonic acid can increase on a ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle. Arachidonic acid itself isn't problematic. It only does something when it's told to do something. So it can either become inflammatory or not. So living a ketogenic lifestyle, we see an increase in arachidonic acid naturally because we are avoiding the stimulus, i.e., all of the toxins from the linoleic acid and the inflammatory downstream effects from consuming carbohydrates and these other toxic compounds. Any elevation in arachidonic acid isn't going to be problematic. It's only problematic if you send it that stimulus, which is going to be an inflammatory stimulus. So I'm unsure in regards to the link to prostate, but if you're living a ketogenic carnivore-based lifestyle, then I don't believe it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that AA does convert to prostaglandins, doesn't it? But it only does it if it's told to do that. Yeah. And that's what happened. This is these tenuous links that the vegetarian community throw at the animal-based diet, forgetting that the environment doesn't actually initiate these inflammatory processes, and they miss that every single time.
Yeah, it's going to do these things via lipoxygenase and cyclooxygenase, and thromboxanes, prostaglandins, prostacyclins, and leukotrienes are the downstream effect from increased arachidonic acid. So it depends on what the stimulus is. But again, unless it's inflammatory, then I don't believe it's going to be a problem, because we see an increase in arachidonic acid levels in people who live in a ketogenic lifestyle without any downstream deleterious effects.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you, Richard. That's great. Right. Okay. Does lard contain harmful levels of linoleic acid? I just want to say about this. When you're looking at omega-6, just take a step back and think. People talk about omega-6 and omega-3 ratios. Sometimes looking at the actual balance of just the amount is really an interesting thing to do. So pork tends to be flagged up because of the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, okay? But if you took a tablespoon, just a tablespoon of soya bean oil, that would have the same omega-6 amount as 3.5 kilograms of pork. All right. So it isn't about the ratios and just the ratios. It's what's called the omega balance, all right, which is much more interesting because it's talking about absolute values. And if I showed you a graph of some of the animal foods, and I'll dig this out while Richard answers, you will be absolutely gobsmacked how bad soybean oil is. It just blows anything else out of the water when it comes to omega-6s. So, yes, you will get that in lard, which is rendered pig fat, but lard is particularly good to cook with. It's pretty tasty. And it does contain it, but it's actually quite low amounts of linoleic acid. So I don't think it's that bad. If you want to compare, see, this is it. You compare it to a vegetable oil. Wow, you will use lard all the time. It's really that simple. But if you feel like you're going to have 3 or 4 bricks of it, 250 grams of lard, and then another 250, yeah, that's probably too much. But realistically, it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And also what we need to understand when it comes to linoleic acid is that it's problematic because it's oxidized. But if the fat or the meat that we consume from said animal is fresh, then by definition, it's not oxidized. So they are two very different things in two very different circumstances. Lard, or pigs in general, pork, for example, does contain higher levels of linoleic acid. It's around 10 to 20 times higher than that of beef. But again, it's non-oxidized because it's going to be fresh, at least in most cases. We also need to understand that lard is incredibly good at lowering deuterium. So what we take with one, we can offset with another. Lard, I think, is one of the healthier options, especially when we look at a cardiovascular standpoint. There was a study that I mentioned on Lee's Live recently, which looks at all-cause mortality, risk of cardiovascular implications in groups of people who were fed lard, another group fed vegetable oil, and another were olive oil. Now, the lard group came out on top as being by far the healthiest, with the least amount of deaths within this group of people who already suffered with heart issues. So lard is one of the better fats for me. Sorry, Steve, but personally, tallow is going to be my number one. Ghee, butter, and lard, but anything that's hard at room temperature. But yeah, I would use lard if it's available. I wouldn't be using or preference things like olive oil. But I don't cook in oil anymore, or fats in general even. I don't add fats to cooking. I just cook my meats within their own juices. I cover the pan that I'm cooking in, and I allow them to cook in their own environment without any added fat. Sorry, Steve.
That's all right. I just found that graph, by the way. So if you look at the blue is omega-3 and the red is omega-6. And if you look at walnuts, I mean, it actually literally goes off the chart. I mean, it's huge amount of omega-6. And soybean oil, that is a tablespoon you're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, and that omega-6 is through the roof. So that's coming up to 7 here on the graph for those that are only listening on audio.
So there's more there in chicken thighs, look, considerably more in chicken thighs than in pork.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah. But I mean, chicken thighs are still
incredibly,
yeah. So 7 for soybean oil, 3.4 for tofu, and 1.64 for a chicken thigh. So salmon and mackerel and tuna, beautiful. Ribeye steak, 0.7. So ribeye steak has 1/10 of the amount compared to soybean oil. So yeah, I just wanted to show that because it's important to put this in perspective. I would thoroughly recommend, if you're interested in this, to get the book called The Omega Balance. I think it's a particularly good book because it doesn't just talk about ratios, it talks about absolute amounts, and that was the reason for that graph. But great Great. Let's go on to the next one. We Are All One asks, if you could take only 3 supplements for longevity, what would they be?
Beef steak, lamb.
Look, go for it, mate.
Look, I own a supplement company. As you guys know, I manufacture electrolytes and other compounds that I believe to be beneficial. For optimal health, I truly believe that we can obtain this through purely diet, animal proteins, natural fats, particularly grass-fed beef and lamb. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Now, that said, are there ways that we can pull more levers, should we say? I do believe that C8 MCT is highly beneficial, and more so again, I believe that exogenous ketones are incredibly beneficial should you have a requirement for them, both of which I use every day. And citrulline I consume regularly as it's a potent vasodilator and increases nitric oxide. Those 3 I consume almost every day. For a number of reasons: athletic performance, mental clarity, pure clean energy, blocking inflammation, helping with recovery, increasing EPO after training, and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. Everything that we list to be beneficial within the ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle, we can further enhance by like MCT, which is a natural fat, by the way, and exogenous ketones, which are made from bacteria. So again, I deem those to be natural. So I truly believe that we can achieve optimal health and well-being purely by consuming animal proteins. But to answer the question, as far as supplementation goes, the MCT, the BHB I consume, the electrolytes I consume every day also, I think. So there we are. There's my 4. I'll steal one of yours.
Yeah, it's a bonus one. Right. Supplement. I eat Carnivore and I take Stem Enhance. That's my supplement, which is a cereal product, which increases the release of adult stem cells into the blood from the bone marrow. That's it. That's what I do. Sorry to be boring, but I'm only allowed 2 because Richard's had 4. But that would be my answer anyway. I think supplements definitely have a place, but to alleviate a symptom, to help with recovery, to reduce anxiety, all of those things, they definitely have a place. But I don't feel I need it. But if I did, I would. So, for instance, Richard, you're always talking about the MCT and ketones, and I absolutely 100% believe that. At the moment, I don't feel my cognitive ability I don't feel anxious. I don't, and the other thing I think is avoidance of things is one of the keys to longevity. So it isn't about what you take, it's what you avoid. So stress, too much sitting in front of the screens, surrounding yourself with negative people, trying to win arguments when you're talking to someone that is stupid and won't want to listen to you. You're wasting your time. Gratitude, grounding, being outside. So the absence of being inside, the absence of artificial lights, all of those things are going to help. Not being on your mobile phone, remove that, remove your laptop, iPad. All of those things, honestly, would be better for longevity. I'm not a rich person, but all of those things are free. You can make a decision. I have to work. I have to do this. So I can't completely be off all the devices, but as soon as I can, I don't have ebooks. I have books. I like a book that's got paper. Firstly, I prefer that anyway, because you can highlight it, you can turn pages over, you can write in it. It doesn't need a battery. It doesn't run out on the bus or the train or the plane. It's there. It can't be altered by people that want to run the narrative. So if I've got a book at the moment, Cell Physiology. I know that that's science and that's not going to be altered. So I like reading that book. So yeah, sorry, I got on my high horse there. I don't really want to. So I'm going to move on to the next question.
Love it.
Right. Joey Collins had lots of chemo and radiotherapy over the last 10 years. Sorry to hear that. 2 times cancer survivor. I'm very glad to hear that. Well done. but body is exhausted, and I totally get that as well. I lost both of my parents to cancer and a girlfriend to breast cancer when I was much younger, in my 20s. So yeah, you have my sympathy going through that. Hypothyroidism and carnivore for 4 months. Any advice going forward?
Yeah, sorry, Steve, I thought you were going to jump in. Yeah, I think you're doing everything right. Carnivore is definitely the way forward of this. If we look at cancer, cancer cells basically lose their ability for oxidative phosphorylation, so they will ferment glucose into fuel. If you do not consume glucose, then you starve said compound of its fuel source, at least one of the main ones. Now, living a ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle is going to be highly beneficial to this. Our good friend Andrew Scarborough can attest to this, and many other people that you and I have worked with, Steve. Carnivore for 4 months. Look, just eat as nature intended. Consume around 1 gram, or 0.9 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, roughly. Eat the fat that comes with the protein, but don't fear the fat. Fat, in your case, is going to be incredibly beneficial. Around 2-to-1 ratio, I think, in weight from grams seems to be more beneficial for people with cancer. At least I know you're a survivor there, but we don't want to be feeding with any carb or glucose. So keep those out. Any other advice? Hypothyroidism and carnivore. I think you're ticking all the boxes. Keep doing what you're doing. Meal timings. Personally, I find that men do better on 1 to 2 meals a day. Women tend to do better on 2 to 3. One of the questions that Steve has for us in our private group after this call, actually, is to do with, my answer to this is going to be to do with meal timings, and we'll get into that in the school group. But yeah, what would you add, Steve? I think, look, ketogenic and carnivore lifestyles are always going to be incredibly beneficial in regards to cancer. Remove the fuel source, and you can't, that cancer can't run. It can't fuel. It can use alternative fuels, but this tends to be downstream. But removing the sugar, the fructose, the glucose, all forms of sugar is going to be highly beneficial.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would look at things like iodine. And have you got hypothyroidism? Are you being told that from bloods, or do you have the symptoms? I would make sure that it is actually hypothyroidism, rather than you being told because the bloods say you have got it. So just make sure that I would get a full panel to make sure that is the right diagnosis if you haven't. So that would be TSH, 3T4, 3T3, reverse T3, TPO and TG antibodies. Definitely do that. I would also throw in an iodine clearance test to see if you're deficient in iodine, which people don't talk about very much. But that's where you're given a tablet, a certain amount of iodine, or sometimes it's in a drink, and then measure your urine output over the next 24 hours. And if, say, for instance, just to make sums easy for you, if you've got a tablet that's got 100 units of iodine in and you urinate out 100 units of iodine, then you're not deficient in iodine. But if you urinate out 20, then your body's hanging on to it. So you might benefit from iodine drops. So I think that would be sort of not medical advice. That's just general advice for you to have a look at when it comes to things like blood tests and stuff. I have put a link into our school community. If you didn't know what Richard is talking about, we run a small community for like-minded people. It's very inexpensive to join. You get another 30 minutes after this hour is finished if you join the school community, and then you can ask particular questions. And we also have another hour tomorrow night, which is very exclusive. You can ask your questions. And within the community, you meet about 438 different people. That's what it currently is. All following the same lifestyle, all really friendly, all really supportive. And you can ask tons and tons of questions. There's loads of courses for you, free ebooks and everything. It's fabulous. Richard, this is a question for you from Darren. Richard, how many hours are you running, cycling a week, and how is your recovery from it? Thanks.
Brilliant question. Not as much as I should be. Look, on an average week, I tend to run once a week. My training is absolutely awful at the moment. I've been out all of 3 times this year on the bike. So my training has taken a massive nosedive. But my timings haven't changed an awful lot. So as you guys know, I've gravitated away from bodybuilding as a professional, and I now work with athletes and people from all walks of life, people with diabetes, people with cancer, and so on and so forth. But the athletes I work with, they seem to predominate within the endurance side. So I dipped my toe into that water to see if I could learn more myself, because if I can work with these people and understand what their training involves, then I can better fuel them for that. 1 to 2 times a week I run. I don't run very far either. It might be 10K, typically once or twice a week. My running is awful, but going back to mid last year, I was running 2 to 3 times a week, and I was cycling 2 to 3 times, including indoor and outdoor. The longer rides, sometimes over the weekend, may have been as much as 112 miles when I was with the guys who were training for Ironman. Beyond that, maybe on a Tuesday, something, it might be 40 to 60 miles. Recovery was always really good. This way of living is fantastic for helping inflammation recovery and so on and so forth. But what I have noticed this year that I've taken my foot off the pedal, my times haven't slowed an awful lot. So my best 5K, for example, is around 17 minutes. And I achieved just over this recently in a park run that I hadn't trained for. I ran Cardiff half marathon recently untrained, and I managed to bring that in at 1 hour 27, I think it was, which is not too far behind my best. But this is off the back of not doing an awful lot of training. And the reason I say this, I genuinely believe that we get way more bang for our buck when we live ketogenic and carnivore-based lifestyle. We recover quicker, we adapt quicker, we can push harder. So what I get out seems to be a lot more for what someone else would put in for the same amount of work that I put in. But a boring answer, I know, Darren, but it's life gets in the way, unfortunately. Life gets in the way, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it's a boring answer. It's the answer. But I just did a boring answer about what I would do for longevity. For those that don't know what I'm talking about with the school, if you decide to use the link in the description, what will happen is you will end up in the school community like this, where we've got loads of different things, playback from weeks and weeks and weeks ago, this one here, and questions and recipes and much more, general discussions. But you need to go to the top here and you'll go to the calendar, or let's click on the classroom. There's all the courses, all available for you to have a look at. Keto course, carnivore course, thyroid, dairy, fruit and veg, protein, ebooks available, problem solving. And then the calendar is where you go. You go to the calendar. This is where we are right now. And then on Sunday at 8 p.m, we do an extra half an hour. And here we are at 8 p.m, almost on a Sunday. So that is what you need to do. If you join the school, like I say, the link is in the chat right now. I'll get rid of that. Richard, I just want to thank you for, from the bottom of my heart, or the heart of my bottom, I don't know, one of the two, for being really good. I'm glad we've got some new people on board that have said that they came to you because they saw you on Dr. Eric Westman's channel. And I hope you haven't disappointed. I don't think you have. Have you enjoyed it tonight?
Yeah, as always, Steve, and thank you. I always enjoy our chats. I think I learn every time that we go live. I'm hoping that the listeners do also. Thank the listeners also. And if Dr. Eric Westman happens to listen to this, thank him for reviewing that video that I did with Lee. And thankfully, he agreed with everything pretty much that I said, which is fantastic. So,
well, yeah, you understand the mechanisms. Yeah, so it's good. Richard, just so you know about the viewer count, yours is higher than mine. So that's good. It's showing that people are interested in coming over to your channel. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you've come to Richard's channel and you've liked what you've heard from me, then could you like and share and subscribe to my channel? But Richard, you're on 75 and I'm on 53. On Twitter or X, I've got 8 people at the moment. But you were over 80. Over 85 for a bit there. So anyway, thanks for listening, and join us over at school for the next half an hour. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, guys.